Francis Bacon, in essays Civil and Moral, writes of the helmet of Pluto, which maketh the politic man go invisible, suggesting that secrecy in counsel and swiftness in execution are the modern equivalents of this god's ancient powers. This image of invisibility, of power operating unseen, perfectly captures something essential about today's video essay. For Pluto has always been about what lies beneath the earth, beneath consciousness, beneath appearances. Pluto, Hades, Plouton, Ploutos, Dispata, the names themselves tell a story of transformation. From feared ruler of the dead to economic force, from chthonic deity to celestial body, from mythological figure to psychological principle. Pluto shapeshifts through history, resisting any single definition. Even now, the entity bears multiple identities. A dwarf planet at the edge of our known solar system, the 9th largest and 10th most massive known object, directly orbiting the Sun, a body made of ice and rock that break our categories of what constitutes a planet. This multiplicity of identity is fitting, for Pluto has always been about transformation. Consider how Christian theology wrestled with this figure. As Carl Jung notes in his analysis of the Liber de Arte Chymica, it required nothing less than Christ Jesus, with the Virgin Mary and the Holy Ghost, in an unutterable mystery and most profound sacrament, to free souls from Pluto's realm. The very magnitude of the divine power required suggests Pluto's fundamental significance, not just as an underworld deity, but as a representation of the depths that both terrify and transform us. Indeed, when in 1930 astronomers discovered a new world at the edge of our solar system, it seemed more than coincidence that they named it Pluto. Just as Freud and Jung were mapping the depths of the human psyche, this celestial Pluto emerged from darkness. The timing was synchronistic, as if the heavens themselves were mirroring humanity's growing awareness of its own depths. The story of this astronomical Pluto feels so connected to its mythological namesake. Like the ancient deity, it hid in darkness until human technology advanced enough to detect its presence. Like the god who ruled both death and wealth, it revealed itself to be both more and less than expected, smaller than predicted, yet commanding its own system of moons, with Charon so large relative to Pluto that astronomers consider them a binary system. Even its surface features, revealed by the New Horizons mission in 2015, seem meaningful, particularly the heart-shaped plane of frozen nitrogen named Tomball Regio, suggesting that what we fear most may contain what we need most. This modern Pluto has undergone its own transformation. In 2006, the International Astronomical Union created a new definition of planet that excluded Pluto, demoting it to dwarf planet status. Yet like a psychological complex that gains power when repressed, Pluto's influence seemed to grow stronger after its official diminishment. The debate continues, reminding us that categories and definitions are human constructs, while reality remains stubbornly complex. This intermix between astronomy, psychology, and mythology points us toward a deeper understanding of Pluto's significance and is what philosophy is meant to do. The ancient texts we are about to explore, from Plato's philosophical dialectic to Homer's epic verses, from the Eleusinian mysteries to Orphic hymns, from Ovid's poetic transformations to Dante's Christian reinterpretation, all attempt to answer fundamental questions about transformation, death, wealth, and wisdom that haunt us today the same way they did over 2 millennia ago. Remember that we are not just studying ancient myths. We engage with patterns of transformation that affect how we understand ourselves and the universe. Whether we find Pluto in the depths of the underworld, the edges of the solar system, or the unconscious mind, it remains a symbol of the transformative power that operates beyond the boundaries of our reality. I am Irevelato. I illuminate the lives and stories of the world's greatest luminaries, mythic figures, and oftentimes gods. The secrets you deserve to know, the fire of Prometheus, the apple, the light, the knowledge, the wisdom, through darkness to illumination. This is what we do here. Never forget that. In today's descent into Pluto's realms, we'll strike the hammer on everything. We will encounter spiritual temples and cosmic voids, philosophical revelation and psychological depth. We're going to reveal why this figure has haunted human consciousness for millennia, why Greek philosophers transformed him from terror to wisdom, why mystery cults spent 2,000 years performing his rites, why Dante split him in two, and why, at the moment humanity discovered its own depths, we found him waiting at the edge of our solar system. If you're exploring our channel, you'll find deep dives into Plato, Jung, Nietzsche, Francis Bacon, and countless others. Each video is a gateway to understanding. Each exploration reveals new angles and details of the eternal mysteries that shape us. To our returning viewers, you know what we do here and why you are here. You know this is certainly not passive entertainment. This is a journey into the meaning of reality. Your engagement, your willingness to face these truths, helps ensure these revelations reach others who refuse comfortable ignorance, who understand that wisdom demands courage, who know that real transformation begins where certainty ends. For those new here, welcome to the depths. If you value raw truth over comfortable lies, if you're ready to strike past surface knowledge to the pulsating core of wisdom, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Irevelato. Join us in illuminating what others fear to face. I aim to approach all matters holistically, comprehensively, exhaustively. Because the unexplored life is not worth living. Socrates, Plato, and all ancients knew that very well. Pluto teaches it too, and we're about to prove it. Support options and additional resources await in the description below. But right now, we have a god of transformation to understand. Let's begin. In his dialogue, Cratylus, the Greek philosopher Plato brilliantly investigates the hidden meanings behind names, including those of gods such as Pluto and Hades. While Pluto is often conflated with Hades, the god of the underworld, due to people's fears of death and the unknown, Plato argues that this is a fundamental misunderstanding of Pluto's true nature. Plato begins by examining the etymology of Pluto's name, tracing it to the Greek word Ploutos, meaning wealth. Pluto gives wealth, Ploutos, Plato writes, and his name means the giver of wealth, which comes out of the earth beneath. However, the common misconception of equating Pluto with Hades arises from what Plato calls people's foolish fears about death and the afterlife. Despite these misapprehensions, Plato asserts that there is a profound consistency between Pluto's name and his actual role. One of the most intriguing aspects of Plato's characterization of Pluto is his power to bind souls in the afterlife with the strongest chains. So potent are his enchantments that even the alluring sirens cannot escape his grasp. Plato attributes this ability to Pluto's skill in infusing his words with charm, describing him as the perfect and accomplished sophist and the great benefactor of the inhabitants of the otherworld. Yet Plato quickly clarifies that Pluto's influence does not stem from deception or coercion, but rather from a deep philosophical and moral purpose. Pluto, he explains, will have nothing to do with men while they are in the body, but only when the soul is liberated from the desires and evils of the body. It is in this liberated state that Pluto can bind them with the desire of virtue. This reveals the wisdom and understanding that Pluto symbolizes in reality. His aim is not to punish or imprison souls, but to guide them toward virtue and enlightenment. Plato further elaborates on the idea of Pluto as a wise ruler by noting that he possesses great abundance, but not in the form of material riches. Rather, Pluto's wealth lies in his vast knowledge and insight, which he uses to bestow exceeding blessings, not only on the souls in his realm, but also on the living up above. This suggests that Pluto's benevolent influence transcends the frontiers of life and death. In a striking etymological move, Plato argues that the name Hades is not in fact derived from the Greek word eides, meaning unseen or invisible, as many believe. Instead, he connects it to the word eidonai, meaning to know all that is virtuous and noble. This reinterpretation reinforces the notion of Pluto as an enlightened philosopher king who rules through wisdom rather than fear. Ultimately, Plato's portrayal of Pluto in Cratylus presents a complex, nuanced figure who serves as a giver of wealth, a binder of souls, and a possessor of profound knowledge. On a metaphorical level, Pluto's liberating powers can be seen as a parallel to philosophy, which frees the mind from ignorance and guides it toward higher truth and understanding, just as Pluto leads souls to blessings and virtue in the afterlife. By reimagining Pluto as a wise and benevolent guide, Plato asks us to strive, like Pluto, to seek a richer form of wealth, that of wisdom, virtue, and the unshakable treasures of the mind. Then the story Socrates shares in Plato's Gorgias makes Pluto's role in the afterlife even clearer. In this tale, Pluto is a key figure in the godly interplay of justice and retribution. The central problem the story addresses is the flawed judgment process for souls after death. With both judges and judged still clothed in their earthly bodies and trappings, external appearances and false testimonies could sway the outcome, leading to unjust assignments of rewards and punishments. To rectify this, Zeus implements a system where all are stripped bare, leaving only the naked soul visible. Pluto and his fellow judges can then pierce to the heart of each soul, seeing its true nature and deeds. This metaphor of stripping away external layers to reveal inner truth also resonates with Plato's philosophy more broadly. Just as the philosopher must look beyond physical shadows to encounter the eternal forms, Pluto must see past worldly identities to judge the soul justly. The story also highlights the collaboration between divine justice, Zeus, and philosophical wisdom, Pluto, in maintaining cosmic order. Pluto serves as a mediator, aligning earthly and heavenly realms through his role as judge and guide. But it is Pluto, along with the authorities from the islands of the Blessed, who first alerts Zeus to the problem of souls being sent to the wrong destinations after death. This detail is significant as it suggests that Pluto is not a passive ruler of the netherworld. By bringing this matter to Zeus, Pluto demonstrates a keen awareness of the workings of the afterlife and a concern for the proper allocation of rewards and punishments. He recognizes that the current system is flawed and takes the initiative to seek a solution from the highest authority, Zeus himself. This action portrays Pluto as a responsible and proactive ruler, one who is deeply invested in the fair and orderly governance of his domain. Moreover, Pluto's collaboration with the authorities from the islands of the Blessed also tells us that there are various realms of the afterlife. Rather than being an isolated or antagonistic figure, Pluto appears to work in concert with other powers to ensure the smooth functioning of the cosmic order. This paints a more vivid picture of the underworld and its relationship to the rest of the divine hierarchy. So what can this tell us about Pluto's overall role and character in Platonic thought? Building on the insights from Cratylus, where Pluto was portrayed as a philosophical guide and benefactor to souls, the Gorgias story further emphasizes his impartiality, active engagement, and function in upholding the moral and metaphysical equilibrium of the universe. Pluto is deeply concerned with justice, truth, and the proper alignment of souls with their deserved fates. He is not content to merely preside over the underworld, but seeks to refine the systems of judgment and retribution that shape the destiny of every soul. For our own lives, this story should make us reflect on the clothing that might obscure our true natures and how we can nurture clear-sighted judgment and commit to justice. By striving to embody Pluto's virtues, we move closer to the Platonic ideal of a life well lived. Readers of Plato understand that Pluto is the deity that makes us reflect on the deeper structures of justice, truth, and spiritual growth that are the foundation of every true philosopher. And once again, we need to think beyond simplistic dichotomies of good and evil, reward and punishment, and see the responsibilities and relationships within our moral universe. In Phaedo, Plato further elaborates on the nature of the soul and its journey to the afterlife, and the realm of Hades and the role of the true philosopher seem to merge. Socrates argues that the soul, being invisible and akin to the divine, is not destroyed upon leaving the body at death, contrary to popular belief. Instead, if the soul is pure and unencumbered by bodily attachments, it is destined for the place of the true Hades, which is described as equally invisible, pure, and noble. This conception of Hades as a place of truth and purity aligns with the portrayal of Pluto and Hades in Cratylus and Gorgias as a wise and just ruler, overseeing the proper judgment and allocation of souls. The true Hades is not a dark, fearsome underworld, but a realm of philosophical enlightenment, where the soul can commune with the good and wise God. Socrates suggests that the path to this enlightened afterlife lies in the practice of philosophy, which he defines as the study of death. By constantly striving to detach oneself from bodily concerns and to gather the soul into itself, the philosopher effectively prepares for the final separation of soul and body at death. Therefore, Pluto, Hades, is a guide and benefactor to souls, helping them to liberate themselves from earthly attachments and to embrace wisdom and virtue. The philosopher, in studying death, is in a sense already under the tutelage of Pluto, learning to navigate the transition from body to soul. The true Hades is not a place to be feared, but rather a goal to be sought, through the practice of philosophy and the cultivation of a pure soul. By aligning the philosopher's journey with the soul's journey to Hades, Plato underscores the intimate connection between wisdom, virtue, and the divine, and Pluto, Hades, is the central deity in this cosmology, guiding and receiving those souls who have properly prepared themselves for the transition to a higher plane of existence. Pluto's role is to oversee the proper alignment of the soul with its ultimate destiny, ensuring that those who have pursued wisdom and virtue in life are granted access to the true Hades, where they can continue their philosophical journey in communion with the divine. For Plato, this vision of the afterlife serves as a powerful motivator for the philosophical life. By keeping one's sight set on the invisible, the pure and the noble, and by striving to detach oneself from the distractions and desires of the body, one can hope to follow in the footsteps of the true philosopher, earning a place next to the wise and good God. Then, in the Republic, Plato further develops his vision of the afterlife and the role of Pluto or Hades within it, now with a keen eye toward the ethical and political implications of these beliefs for the ideal state. Plato's Socrates, in discussing the proper education of the guardians of the state, emphasizes the importance of instilling courage in these future leaders. Central to this courage is the ability to face death without fear, which in turn requires a reappraisal of conventional notions of the underworld. Socrates argues that the guardians must not be exposed to stories that portray Hades as a dark and terrifying place, as such tales will only breed fear and undermine their bravery. He specifically calls out Homer and other poets for their grim depictions of the realm of the dead, insisting that these passages be obliterated or expunged from the education of the young. In Plato's view, the true Hades is not a place of sapless shades or ghostly forms, but rather a realm of enlightenment and wisdom, as suggested by the other dialogues we visited. The myths that portray it as a source of dread are not only false but harmful, weakening the resolve of those who should be prepared to choose death over defeat or slavery. This critique of the traditional Hades mythology serves to reinforce Plato's broader vision of Pluto as a wise and benevolent ruler, in contrast to the fearsome and gloomy figure of popular imagination. By commending the true nature of the underworld, Plato seeks to align beliefs about death and the afterlife with his philosophical and ethical ideals. Moreover, this reappraisal of Hades has significant political implications within the context of the Republic. Plato's ideal state is one in which each individual plays a specific role according to their abilities and virtues, with the philosophically inclined guardians at the helm. But by properly understanding death and the afterlife, Plato believes that we'll cultivate the courage and wisdom necessary for these guardians to govern justly and effectively. In this light, Plato's Pluto takes on a new significance as a model for the kind of virtuous and enlightened leadership he envisions. Just as Pluto oversees the just judgment and allocation of souls in the afterlife, so too must the guardians of the state uphold justice and guide their citizens toward the good. This connection between the mythological and the political realms is characteristic of Plato's thought, which often uses allegorical and metaphorical frameworks to convey deep truths about the nature of reality and the proper ordering of human affairs. By refashioning the figure of Pluto into a symbol of wisdom, justice, and enlightened rule, Plato subverts traditional mythologies in service of his philosophical vision. Of course, this reinterpretation of Hades is not without its issues. Plato acknowledges the poetic power and cultural resonance of the very myths he seeks to overturn, noting that their poetical charm makes them all the more dangerous to impressionable minds. The task of re-educating the populace and redirecting their beliefs about death and the afterlife is thus a formidable one, requiring a sustained effort to reshape Greek culture entirely. Yet for Plato, this effort is essential to the proper functioning of the state and the cultivation of virtuous citizens. By aligning beliefs about Pluto with his philosophical and ethical ideals, he seeks to create a harmonious continuity between the earthly and divine worlds, in which the pursuit of wisdom and justice in life is reflected and rewarded in the afterlife. This continuity is reinforced by the figure of the philosopher-ruler, who embodies the virtues of both realms and serves as a mediator between them. Just as Plato's Pluto guides souls toward enlightenment in the afterlife, so too must the philosopher-king guide the state toward the good in the world of the living. There are deep interconnections between metaphysics, ethics, and politics in his thought. And by reinterpreting the mythological ruler of the underworld as a model of enlightened governance, Plato obliges us to rethink our beliefs about death and the afterlife and our understanding of leadership, justice, and the proper ordering of human affairs. Pluto once again proves to be a powerful symbol of Plato's philosophical project as a whole, a call to align our beliefs, actions, and institutions with the eternal truths of wisdom and virtue, both in this life and the next. In the Laws, Plato's last and longest dialogue, and in some sense an upgrade to the Republic, we discover an even more interesting description of Pluto's role in the ideal city and the cosmic order. This work, which presents a detailed blueprint for a hypothetical state ruled by law, shows how Plato's mature philosophical and political thought intersects with his evolving understanding of the gods and the afterlife. One of the key themes that emerges in the Laws is the distinction between divine and human goods. Plato's Athenian stranger, the main speaker in the dialogue, asserts that happiness or good is of two kinds: the divine goods, which include wisdom, temperance, justice, and courage, and the lesser human goods, such as health, beauty, strength, and wealth. Crucially, he identifies Pluto not with the blind god of riches, but with a more discerning figure who has eyes to see and follow wisdom. Plato once again subverts traditional mythologies in service of his philosophical and ethical vision. Just as in the Republic, where Pluto is reimagined as a just and enlightened judge of souls, here in the Laws he becomes a symbol of the higher values that should guide both individual and collective life. Moreover, Plato's Athenian stranger emphasizes the importance of properly honoring and integrating Pluto into the religious and cultural life of the city. He proposes a system of festivals and sacrifices dedicated to the various gods, including specific rites for Pluto in the 12th month. Interestingly, he notes that warlike men should entertain no aversion to Pluto, but rather honor him as being always the best friend of man. This suggestion that Pluto is a friend rather than an enemy of humankind is a remarkable departure from conventional views. Death and the afterlife become a natural and even beneficial part of the human experience, instead of being something to be feared or resisted. By honoring Pluto and the infernal deities alongside the Olympian gods, the citizens of Plato's ideal city would cultivate a more balanced and harmonious relationship with the full spectrum of divine powers, like an ancient individuation process. But Plato's Athenian stranger goes further, arguing that the dissolution of soul and body is no way better than their connection. This provocative statement opposes the common belief that death is an evil to be avoided at all costs. Instead, it suggests that the separation of the soul from the body, the very process over which Pluto presides, is a natural and potentially even beneficial event. This idea resonates with Plato's arguments in the Phaedo, where he presents death as a liberation of the soul from the prison of the body, and with his portrayal of Plato as a wise guide and benefactor of souls in the afterlife. At the same time, the Athenian stranger is careful to distinguish the infernal deities and their rites from the heavenly gods and their ceremonies. This is a hierarchical divine realm, with the Olympian gods associated with the higher, more rational aspects of existence, and the chthonic deities like Pluto linked to the lower, more irrational or emotional dimensions of life. Yet even as he acknowledges this hierarchy, Plato's speaker insists on the importance of giving each god their due, and not confusing their rights and attributes. This balanced and inclusive approach to the gods is characteristic of Plato's mature thought, which seeks to harmonize traditional religious beliefs with his own philosophical and ethical commitments. By finding a place for Pluto and the other infernal deities within his ideal city and cosmos, Plato acknowledges the complexity and diversity of the divine realm, while still asserting the primacy of wisdom, justice, and the other cardinal virtues. Moreover, the Athenian stranger's discussion of the festivals and sacrifices in honor of the gods masterfully displays the rich cultural and social life of Plato's hypothetical city. By connecting Pluto and the other deities into daily existence through rituals, competitions, and artistic celebrations, Plato envisions a society in which religion is not a separate or compartmentalized sphere, but rather an integral part of the community's shared values and aspirations. This integration of the sacred and the secular, the divine and the human, is a key theme in the laws, and one that has important implications for our understanding of Pluto's role in Platonic thought. By honoring Pluto as a friend of man and a patron of the mysteries of death and rebirth, the citizens of Plato's city would cultivate a more profound and nuanced relationship with the cycles of nature and the deeper dimensions of the psyche. At the same time, by recognizing Pluto's association with wisdom and divine goods, they would be reminded of the higher values and ideals that should guide their lives, both as individuals and as members of a larger community. In this way, Pluto embodies both our setbacks and our opportunities, and therefore points the way towards a more enlightened and harmonious way of life. Of course, the Athenian stranger's vision of Pluto and the ideal city is not without its tensions and ambiguities. The idea of a hierarchical divine realm with the infernal gods subordinated to the heavenly ones sits uneasily with the notion of honoring all the gods equally and giving each their due. Similarly, the emphasis on martial valor and the frequent staging of mock battles and competitions suggests a society that is still deeply shaped by the values of war and conflict, even as it aspires to peace and harmony. Yet given the current state of the 21st century, are we really more civilized or less violent than they were? I highly doubt it. Yet these tensions and contradictions are perhaps inevitable in any attempt to envision a perfect city or a fully harmonized cosmos. What makes Plato's laws so compelling is its willingness to fight with these threats head-on and to offer a vision of human flourishing that is both idealistic and pragmatic, both aspirational and grounded in the realities of human nature and social life. The Athenian stranger's treatment of Pluto in the laws can be seen as a culmination of the themes and ideas that Plato has been developing throughout his dialogues. From the Phaedo's vision of death as a liberation of the soul, to the Republic's portrayal of Pluto as a just and enlightened judge, to the Gorgias's emphasis on the importance of living a virtuous life in preparation for the afterlife, Plato's understanding of this complex and enigmatic god has been altered by his deepest philosophical and ethical commitments. By honoring Pluto as a friend and a guide, a patron of wisdom, and a reminder of the mysteries of death and rebirth, the citizens of Plato's ideal city would cultivate a more profound and harmonious relationship with the divine, the natural world, and their own deepest selves. And for us, as readers of Plato, this vision of Pluto and the ideal city serves as an invitation to reflect on our own values and commitments, and to strive for a way of life that is guided by wisdom, justice, and a deep reverence for the gods and the natural order. Lastly, in Epinomis, a dialogue attributed to Plato but possibly written by his student Philip of Opus, we find a fascinating discussion of the importance of studying the heavenly bodies for understanding the divine and achieving wisdom. The Athenian stranger argues that the true astronomer is the one who recognizes the intelligence and divinity behind their motions. This idea of the celestial bodies as embodiments of divine reason and order is a fitting capstone to Plato's treatment of Pluto and the other gods throughout his dialogues. Just as Pluto is portrayed as a wise and just ruler of the afterlife, overseeing the proper allocation of rewards and punishments, so too are the planets and stars seen as rational and benevolent forces guiding and illuminating the lives of mortals. In this light, the study of astronomy is deeply philosophical and spiritual. By contemplating the regularities and harmonies of the celestial motions, the astronomer attunes their mind to the deeper patterns and principles that govern the cosmos and cultivates a sense of wonder and reverence for the divine intelligence that animates it all. Interestingly, although Plato could not have known about the existence of the distant planet that would later be named Pluto, there is a curious resonance between his portrayal of the god Pluto and the astrological and symbolic associations that have come to be attached to this celestial body. In modern astrology, Pluto is often seen as a powerful and transformative force associated with the mysteries of death and rebirth, the depths of the psyche, and the process of spiritual evolution and regeneration. These themes echo the various depictions of Pluto that we have encountered in Plato's dialogues, from the wise and just judge of the afterlife in the Gorgias and the Republic, to the friend and benefactor of humans in the Laws, to the guide and liberator of souls in the Phaedo. In each case, Pluto is there when we confront the deepest mysteries of life and death, and asks us to cultivate the wisdom and virtue that will guide us through existence in its entirety. So perhaps it is fitting that the planet Pluto, though unknown to Plato himself, has come to be associated with many of the same themes and ideas that he explored in his dialogues. By studying this distant and enigmatic world, and the other celestial bodies that inhabit our solar system and beyond, we may gain a deeper appreciation for the beauty, order, and intelligence that permeate the cosmos, and a greater sense of our own place within this vast and wondrous universe. In this way, the Epinomis's call to study the heavens can be seen as a fitting coda to Plato's philosophical and mythological explorations of Pluto and the other gods. By turning our gaze upwards and contemplating the divine principles that govern the motions of the stars and planets, we may find a new perspective on the mysteries of life and death, and a deeper understanding of our own nature and purpose. And so we may find ourselves not only with a greater appreciation for the richness and depth of ancient Greek thought, but also with a renewed sense of wonder and awe at the beauty and complexity of the universe we inhabit. By embracing the study of astronomy and the philosophical and spiritual insights it can offer, we may come closer to the ideal of the wise and virtuous life that Plato so passionately advocated, and to a deeper and more harmonious relationship with the divine forces that shape our world and our lives. Having explored Plato's views on Pluto and Hades across several of his dialogues, it's illuminating to turn our gaze back to one of the earliest and most influential depictions of this deity in Greek literature, Homer's Iliad. Composed centuries before Plato's time, the Iliad is a myth that changed how the ancient Greeks understood the gods, the afterlife, and our role in all of this infinite entendre. Throughout the epic, Pluto is invoked as a powerful and ominous presence, the ruler of the underworld and the inexorable destination of the dead. His gloomy reign is a constant spectre that hangs over the battles and bloodshed of the Trojan War, a reminder of the ultimate fate that awaits even the greatest of heroes. In the very opening lines of the poem, Homer sets the stage by declaring that Achilles' wrath hurled to Pluto's gloomy reign the souls of mighty chiefs untimely slain. This establishes Pluto's domain as the final resting place of the fallen, a realm of shadows to which the war's victims are consigned. There is a sense here that even in death, the shades of the departed can take solace in the fulfillment of earthly oaths and the settling of scores, that the concerns of the living continue to hold sway, in some form, even in the halls of Hades. The Iliad is replete with references to Pluto and the underworld, often in the context of the character's mortality and the stark realities of death. In one potent exchange, the Lycian king Sarpedon taunts a boastful foe with the reminder that his fate is to, by Sarpedon slain, add one more ghost to Pluto's gloomy reign. The hero's bravado is thus undercut by the inevitability of his own demise and the grim prospect of joining the legions of the dead. In another memorable passage, Juno laments the favoritism shown by Zeus to the Trojans, recalling how she once interceded on Hercules' behalf when he ventured to grim Pluto's gloomy gates. Here, the underworld is presented as a dark and forbidding place, a realm of terror that even the greatest hero barely escapes. Pluto himself is memorably described in a speech by Agamemnon, who declares, "Pluto, the grisly god who never spares, who feels no mercy and who hears no prayers, lives dark and dreadful in deep hell's abodes, and mortals hate him as the worst of gods." This chilling portrait emphasizes Pluto's implacable nature, his association with death and the underworld, and his status as a feared and loathed deity among humankind. Homer also highlights Pluto's role in the cosmic hierarchy, as when Poseidon asserts his own sovereignty in the face of Zeus's attempts at domination. Three brother deities from Saturn came, and ancient Rhea, Earth's immortal dame. Assigned by lot our triple rule we know. Infernal Pluto sways the shades below. O'er the wide clouds and o'er the starry plain, ethereal Jove extends his high domain. My court beneath the hoary waves I keep, and hush the roarings of the sacred deep. Olympus and this earth in common lie. What claim has here the tyrant of the sky? This passage establishes Pluto as one of the three great brothers who divide the rule of the cosmos, holding sway over the underworld, just as Zeus commands the heavens and Poseidon the seas. In perhaps the most vivid and unsettling invocation of Pluto, Homer describes the gods' reaction to the great battle between Achilles and Hector as the very earth shakes with the fury of their clash. Deep in the dismal regions of the dead, the infernal monarch reared his horrid head, leaped from his throne, lest Neptune's arm should lay. His dark dominions open to the day, and pour in light on Pluto's drear abodes, abhorred by men and dreadful even to gods. Here, Pluto is portrayed as a fearsome and almost grotesque figure, startled from his throne by the tumult above and terrified at the prospect of his shadowy realm being exposed to the light of day. Yet for all the dread and horror associated with Pluto's domain, the Iliad also hints at a strange sort of comfort or satisfaction to be found in the afterlife. In a poignant address to the fallen Patroclus, the grieving Achilles declares, "All hail, Patroclus, let thy honoured ghost hear and rejoice on Pluto's dreary coast. Behold, Achilles' promise is complete, the bloody Hector stretched before thy feet." There is a sense here that even in death, the shades of the departed can take solace in the fulfillment of earthly oaths and the settling of scores, that the concerns of the living continue to hold sway, in some form, even in the halls of Hades. And in the lament of Priam for the fallen Hector, the Trojan king expresses a grim willingness to abandon the world of the living and join his son in the realm of the dead. "Nor is great Hector lost by me alone. Your sole defence, your guardian power is gone. I see your blood the fields of Phrygia drown. I see the ruins of your smoking town. O send me, gods, ere that sad day shall come, a willing ghost to Pluto's dreary dome." In his despair, Priam almost seems to welcome the oblivion of the underworld as a release from the unrelenting woes of life. Throughout the Iliad, then, Pluto and his empire symbolize a dark and omnipresent shadow to the epic's action, a constant reminder of the mortal limits that circumscribe even the most heroic of deeds. Yet in Homer's portrayal, Hades is not a negation or absence, but a space, a shadow realm that reflects and refracts the passions, the struggles, and the strange consolations of the world above. In this sense, Homer's Pluto anticipates some of the themes and ideas that Plato will later develop in his more philosophical and allegorical treatments of the god. The Iliad's bleak and brooding underworld, with its suggestions of a strange half-life for the shades of the dead, finds echoes in Plato's myths of the afterlife and his notion of Hades as a space of judgment, purgation, and spiritual transformation. And just as Plato will come to reinterpret the figure of Pluto/Hades as a potential guide and benefactor for the aspiring philosopher, a spur to a life of virtue and contemplation, so too does Homer's epic hint at a kind of grim wisdom or hard-won knowledge to be found in the confrontation with mortality and the mysteries of the underworld. For all the terror and dread that Homer's Pluto inspires, there is also a sense in which his realm represents a fundamental truth about the human condition, the inevitability of death, the fragility of earthly glory, the enduring power of memory and myth to shape our understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos. In the final analysis, Homer's vivid and haunting portrayal of Pluto and the underworld in the Iliad stands as a major reference point for classical mythology, There is one that has written an important foundation and inspiration for the later philosophical and allegorical treatments of this enduringly fascinating god, Pluto. Now let us turn our attention to another key text in the mythological tradition surrounding this enigmatic deity, the Homeric hymn to Demeter. Composed sometime in the 7th or 6th century BCE, this hymn offers a rich and evocative account of the abduction of Persephone by Hades and the consequent wanderings and sorrows of her mother Demeter. From the very beginning of the hymn, Hades is introduced as a central figure in the narrative. He is first mentioned in line 2, where he is described as seizing Persephone, setting in motion the main conflict of the story. The act of abduction itself is elaborated upon, and the earth, full of roads leading every which way, opened up under her. It happened on the plain of Nysa. There it was that the Lord who receives many guests made his lunge. He was riding on a chariot drawn by immortal horses, the son of Kronos, the one known by many names. He seized her against her will, put her on his golden chariot. Here, Hades is portrayed as a powerful, determined figure who is not afraid to use force to get what he wants. The description of him as the Lord who receives many guests and the one known by many names emphasizes his status and influence, while the mention of his immortal horses and golden chariot reveals his divinity. The hymn then goes on to describe Persephone's reaction to the abduction and her attempts to resist Hades. And drove away as she wept. She cried with a piercing voice, calling upon her father Zeus, the son of Kronos, the highest and the best. Despite Persephone's cries for help, however, no one is able to come to her aid, highlighting Hades' power and the inability of even the other gods to interfere with his actions. As Demeter searches for her missing daughter, the hymn tells us more about Hades' character and reputation. In lines 79-80, Helios, in revealing Persephone's fate to Demeter, says, "And he, Hades, heading for the misty realms of darkness, seized her as he drove his chariot and as she screamed out loud." This description of the underworld as a misty place of darkness reinforces the idea of Hades' realm as a dark, foreboding place, separate from the world of the living. Then Helios tries to reassure Demeter about Hades as a son-in-law, saying, "But I urge you, goddess, stop your loud cry of lamentation. You should not have an anger without bounds, all in vain. It is not unseemly to have of all the immortals such a son-in-law as Hades, the one who makes many Semeta. He is the brother of Zeus, whose seed is from the same place, and as for time, he has his share, going back to the very beginning, when the three-way division of inheritance was made. He dwells with those whose king he was destined by lot to be." This passage serves to highlight Hades' status and power, emphasizing his role as one of the three main deities, along with Zeus and Poseidon, who divided the world among themselves. The mention of his time, honor or prerogative, and his destined kingship over the dead further underscores his importance and authority. Later in the hymn, when Hermes is sent to the underworld to bring Persephone back, we get a glimpse of Hades in his own domain. In lines 357-359, Hades' reaction to Hermes' message is described. "So he spoke. Hades, king of the dead, smiled with his brows, and he did not disobey the order of Zeus the king. Swiftly he gave an order to bright-minded Persephone." The mention of Hades smiling with his brows suggests a certain cryptic or knowing quality to his character, hinting at hidden depths and motives. At the same time, his swift obedience to Zeus's command shows that, despite his own power and authority, he is still subject to the will of the king of the gods. In his parting words to Persephone, Hades attempts to reassure her of her status and influence in the underworld. "Go, Persephone, to your mother, the one with the dark robe. Have a kindly disposition and thumos in your breast. Do not be too upset, excessively so. I will not be an unseemly husband to you in the company of the immortals. I am the brother of Zeus the Father. If you are here, you will be queen of everything that lives and moves about, and you will have the greatest timai in the company of the immortals. Those who violate Dike will get punishment for all days to come. Those who do not supplicate your menos with sacrifice, performing the rituals in a reverent way, executing perfectly the offerings that are due." Here, Hades presents himself as a worthy husband and partner. letting Persephone know that he saw her potential power and influence as queen of the underworld. The mention of punishing those who violate dike, justice or righteousness, and fail to perform proper sacrifices, suggests a regulatory or disciplinary aspect to Hades' rule, in addition to his role as Lord of the Dead. However, even as he seeks to comfort Persephone, Hades also engages in an act of trickery, giving her a pomegranate seed to eat in order to ensure her return to the underworld. But he, Hades, gave her stealthily the honey-sweet berry of the pomegranate to eat, peering around him. He did not want her to stay for all time over there, at the side of her honorable mother, the one with the dark robe. This moment of deception adds a layer of complexity to Hades' character, suggesting a capacity for manipulation and a strong desire to keep Persephone by his side, even if it means resorting to underhanded means. Throughout the hymn, the underworld itself is described in evocative and foreboding terms, reflecting Hades' own nature and the fear he inspires in mortals. It is referred to as the misty realms of darkness, the realms of dark mist, and the dank realms of mist, creating a sense of the underworld as a shadowy, mysterious place, separate from the world of the living. In the end, the compromise that is reached, with Persephone spending 1/3 of the year in the underworld and 2/3 with her mother, is a story of the dynamic between Hades and the other gods. While he is forced to yield to the power of Zeus and the demands of Demeter, he still retains a significant degree of influence and control over Persephone and the cycle of life and death. The Homeric hymn to Demeter thus reveals that Hades, Pluto, is a fearsome ruler, determined abductor, powerful consort, and king of the dead. Through the story of Persephone's abduction and the subsequent negotiations for her return, the hymn explores themes of power, authority, compromise, and the delicate balance between the living and the dead. As modern readers, we can find in Hades a figure who embodies both the allure and the terror of death, a god whose nature reflects the deep-seated human fascination with mortality and the mysteries of the afterlife. The Homeric hymn to Demeter makes us contemplate the role of Hades as a vital figure in the Greek mythological cosmos, one whose influence extends far beyond the shadowy realm over which he rules. In Hesiod's Theogony, composed in the 8th or 7th century BCE, we find Pluto, Hades, situated within a comprehensive genealogy of the gods. As one of the 6 children of Kronos and Rhea, along with his siblings Zeus, Poseidon, Hera, Demeter and Hestia, Hades is a central figure in the divine family soap opera that develops throughout the poem. Now, when describing Hades, Hesiod uses the epithet strong Hades and characterizes him as pitiless, reminding us of his unyielding nature and his association with death. This aligns with the fearsome reputation of Hades that we see in other Greek mythological sources, including Homer's Iliad. In another passage, Hesiod describes Cerberus, the multi-headed hound who guards the entrance to the underworld. In front of that stand the echoing halls of mighty Hades and dread Persephone, underworld gods and a frightful, pitiless hound stands guard, and he has a mean trick. When someone comes in, he fawns upon him, wagging his tail and dropping his ears. But he will not allow anyone to leave. He runs down and eats anyone he catches, leaving Persephone's and Hades' gates. What makes this description particularly vivid is the characterization of Cerberus as deceptively friendly to newcomers. He wags his tail and lowers his ears like a normal dog greeting visitors. However, this welcoming demeanor masks his true deadly nature, as he prevents souls from escaping by hunting down and devouring anyone who attempts to leave. This reflects a common theme in Greek mythology, where the journey to the underworld is relatively straightforward, as symbolized by Cerberus's friendly welcome. But return is nearly impossible, shown by his violent prevention of exit. This passage also establishes the halls of Hades and Persephone as echoing, suggesting vast, empty spaces, which adds to the atmospheric and unsettling nature of the underworld description. However, Hesiod also acknowledges Hades' legitimate place within the divine order. After Zeus defeats the Titans and establishes his rule, he divides the world among himself and his brothers. Poseidon is given dominion over the sea, while Hades is allotted the underworld. This three-way division of inheritance confirms Hades' status as one of the three most powerful gods, even as he is relegated to the dark realm of the dead. Later in the poem, when Zeus battles the monstrous Typhoeus, Hades is described as trembling in the underworld, fearing that the earth might be split open and his domain exposed to the light. Hades passionately desires the boundary between the realm of the living and the realm of the dead to remain as is. HESIOD also provides a vivid description of Tartaros, the deepest part of the underworld, where the Titans are imprisoned after their defeat. This chthonic space is characterized by darkness, mist, and a sense of inescapable confinement. While Hades' relationship to Tartaros is not explicitly stated, his role as ruler of the underworld implicitly connects him to this bleak and foreboding place. Overall, Hesiod's portrayal of Pluto, Hades, in the Theogony is relatively brief compared to the more extensive treatments we find in Plato and Homer. Nonetheless, the poem establishes key aspects of Hades' character and role within the mythological cosmos. He is a formidable and pitiless god, yet one who has a legitimate claim to power as part of the divine hierarchy. His realm, while separate from the world of the living, is an integral part of the cosmic order. Hesiod's Hades anticipates some of the themes and ideas that will be developed more fully in later sources. The notion of Hades as a stern but just ruler, presiding over a realm that is both feared and necessary, resonates with Plato's more philosophical and allegorical treatments of the god. And the descriptions of the underworld in the Theogony, with its impenetrable darkness and air of mystery, find traces in Homer's haunting portrayal of Hades in the Iliad. At the same time, Hesiod's genealogical approach to the gods, tracing their lineages and relationships, paints Hades' foundational place within the divine family. By situating him alongside his siblings and depicting the division of power among them, Hesiod tells the way in which Hades, for all his fearsome qualities, is nonetheless a critical part of the at least mythological universe, with a role and a destiny that are inextricably linked to those of the other gods. In this way, the Theogony offers a bedrock portrait of Pluto Hades that will inform and influence later depictions of this god, even as it maintains its own distinct personalities and approach. While not as extensive or elaborated as the treatments we find in Plato and Homer, Hesiod's characterization of Hades nonetheless occupies a crucial place, establishing key motifs and ideas that will continue to shape the god's image and significance for centuries to come. Having explored these foundational texts, let's now see one of the most remarkable manifestations of Pluto's influence in the ancient world: the Eleusinian mysteries. For over 2 millennia, these sacred rites were humanity's longest-running engagement with the themes of death, rebirth, and transformation. From the Bronze Age until their suppression by Christian authorities in 392 CE, they drew initiates from across the Mediterranean world, promising not immortality, but something perhaps more profound, a transformation in how one views death itself. The story begins deep in the Mycenaean period. Archaeological evidence tells us that religious activity at Eleusis dates back to the 15th century BCE. Even the name Eleusis reveals the ancient origins being pre-Greek and possibly related to Elysium and the goddess Eileithyia. Think about this for a moment. Before Homer sang his epics, before Plato wrote his dialogues, people were already gathering at this sacred site to contemplate the mysteries of death and rebirth. The physical heart of these mysteries was the Telesterion, the great hall of initiation. Like the tradition itself, it grew and evolved, being built and rebuilt multiple times over the centuries. What began as a simple megaron eventually became a massive temple that could hold thousands of initiates. Under Roman rule, it could accommodate 3,000 people at once. Imagine that, 3,000 souls simultaneously encountering the mysteries of Pluto's world. The initiation process itself was remarkably structured. It began with the lesser mysteries in the month of Anthesterion, our February or March, near Athens at Agrai. Here, initiates would purify themselves in the river Ilissos and sacrifice a piglet, to Demeter and Persephone. Only then could they become maestai, eligible for the greater mysteries in Boedromion, September or October. Now, the greater mysteries. This was a precisely choreographed 9-day journey into the depths of divine experience. The first day brought the proresis, when the hierophants declared the official start. On the second day, initiates purified themselves in the sea. This was the halade mistai. Sacrifices to Demeter followed, then the procession of sacred objects from ELEUSIS to Athens, and finally the torchlit procession back to ELEUSIS. The secret ceremonies within the telesterion occupied 3 days, concluding with the plemachoi, libation rituals that marked the end. The priesthood that maintained these rites was as carefully structured as the ceremonies themselves. The Eumolpidae family provided the hierophant, the high priest who alone could enter the anaktoron. The Charikis supplied the daduchos, the torchbearer. 2 priestesses, known as the Hierophantides, served Demeter and Persephone, while the Melissa, the bee priestesses, maintained lives of absolute purity. But what actually happened within those sacred walls? Here we encounter the central paradox of the mysteries. Their power lay partly in their secrecy. We know there was the kist, a sacred chest containing unknown objects. We know of the kalathos, a basket possibly holding agricultural symbols. The kaikion, that enigmatic ritual drink of barley, water and mint, played a crucial role. But the core experience, what happened in the darkness of the telesterion, remained unspoken. What we do know is that it involved a syzygy of darkness and light, created by the movement of torches. Sacred sounds and music filled the space. There were the deitnomena, things shown, the dromena, things done, and the legomena, things spoken. The final revelation was described cryptically as an ear of grain reaped in silence. Like Pluto himself, the deeper you look into these mysteries, the more mysterious they become. The influence of these rites spread far beyond Greece. Roman emperors, Augustus, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, sought initiation. The great minds of antiquity, Cicero, Plutarch, possibly Plato himself, and also Pythagoras, underwent these transformative rites. Cicero would later write, "For among the many excellent and indeed divine institutions which your Athens has brought forth and contributed to human life, none, in my opinion, is better than those mysteries. For by their means we have been brought out of our barbarous and savage mode of life and educated and refined to a state of civilization. And as the rites are called initiations, so in very truth we have learned from them the beginnings of life and have gained the power not only to live happily, but also to die with a better hope." Sophocles declared that those who had seen the rites were thrice blessed. Think about what this means. For over 2,000 years, the most powerful and intelligent people in the Western world felt compelled to seek initiation into these mysteries of the invisible realm. They entered the telesterion as one person and emerged, by their own accounts, profoundly transformed. The relationship with Pluto himself was complex and evolving. While the mysteries centered on Demeter and Persephone, Pluto's presence was literally grounded in the site through the Plutonian, a natural cave considered an entrance to the underworld. Special rites honored him in the 12th month. Over time, his role shifted from fearsome abductor to necessary partner in transformation, much as we've seen in our exploration of the philosophical tradition. The decline of the mysteries came gradually, like a long twilight. Sulla's siege of Athens in 86 BCE damaged the sanctuary. The Sarmatians sacked it in 170 CE. Emperor Julian attempted a revival in the 360 S, but by then the tide of history was turning. Theodosius I officially closed the sanctuary in 392 CE, and Gothic King Alaric's forces delivered the final blow in 396. Yet even after their physical destruction, the mystery's influence still has a grip on the present, through us, seekers of truth. Early Christian writers struggled to counter their appeal. Medieval mystery plays preserved some of their theatrical elements. Renaissance humanists sought to reconstruct their wisdom. Even modern psychological theories leverage their transformative process. What made the Eleusinian mysteries unique was their remarkable synthesis. public processions with secret rites, individual transformation within communal experience, agricultural symbolism with spiritual meaning, democratic access with hierarchical organization, emotional experience with intellectual insight, personal revelation within traditional framework. For our understanding of Pluto, these mysteries offer important information. They show us that transformation requires both structure and mystery, that death and rebirth are communal as well as personal experiences, that the dark realm of Pluto is necessary for spiritual renewal. They teach us that true wisdom comes through direct encounter with the depths, that some truths can only be known through experience, that the cycle of loss and return is essential to human growth. The mysteries demonstrate that Pluto's realm isn't just a place of endings, but of beginnings, not where things are lost, but where they are transformed. They suggest that true wisdom comes not from avoiding the dark, but from learning to move through it with purpose and understanding. In this light, Pluto becomes not just the lord of death, but a master of transformation. The Eleusinian mysteries remind us that some truths can only be understood through direct encounter with the depths. Like those ancient initiates, we too must learn to see death not as an endpoint, but as part of a larger cycle of transformation. The power of the mysteries lay not in explaining this truth, but in experiencing it, just as Pluto's power lies not in what we can say about transformation, but in how we encounter and embody it. If the Eleusinian mysteries represented humanity's collective engagement with Pluto's realm, then Orpheus embodies the individual's confrontation with the depths. His journey to the underworld is perhaps the most famous account of a mortal entering Pluto's domain and returning to tell the tale. But Orpheus was more than just another hero who braved the depths. He was a theologian of the underworld, a mystic who transformed his personal descent into a universal pathway for transformation. The Orphic hymn to Pluto reveals a striking departure from the fearsome Homeric vision of the underworld's ruler. Where Homer's Pluto is the one who never relents, the Orphic Pluto is addressed as magnanimous and illustrious king. The hymn recognizes him as terrestrial Jove, acknowledging his role not just as death's keeper, but as life's sustainer. For it is from his realm that abundant annual fruits emerge to nourish needy mortals. This transformation in perspective didn't come easily. Orpheus earned his insight through direct confrontation with death's reality in his failed attempt to rescue Eurydice. Yet what appears as failure on the personal level became triumph on the spiritual plane. For it was this very descent that gave birth to the Orphic mysteries, teachings that would influence Greek thought for centuries to come. The Orphic tradition presents Pluto as keeper of Earth's keys, as follows. Earth's keys to thee, illustrious king, belong, its secret gates unlocking, deep and strong. This image suggests that Pluto's role isn't merely to guard the dead, but to maintain the vital connection between surface and depth, between manifest and hidden realities. He is described as dispensator of unapparent works, a beautiful phrase suggesting his governance over all invisible processes of transformation. What makes the Orphic view particularly significant is its integration of apparent opposites. In the hymn, Pluto is both wrapped forever in the depths of night and a wholly honored light. He rules both dire, inexorable hell and is called terrestrial Jove, suggesting a unity between upper and lower realms that transcends simple dualities. This synthesis reflects Orpheus's own journey, the poet who descended into darkness carrying Apollo's light, whose lyre music bridged the gap between life and death. The hymn also provides crucial new details about Pluto's relationship with Persephone, here called Proserpine. The abduction narrative is recast as a love flight impelled by love rather than violence. The destination is specifically Eleusis, till Eleusina's city rose to view. This creates a direct link between Orphic theology and the Eleusinian mysteries we've just explored. This suggests that both traditions recognize the same profound truth, that the descent into darkness, whether willing or unwilling, contains the seeds of transformation. Perhaps most tellingly, the hymn ends with an invocation to Pluto as one whom sacred poets and their hymns delight. This is a far cry from Homer's dreaded ruler who never smiles. The Orphic Pluto appreciates poetry, suggesting that artistic creation itself might serve as a form of initiated descent, a way of accessing the transformative powers of the depths without physically entering the underworld. The fact that Orpheus was said to have been torn to pieces by Maenads, followers of Dionysus, adds another layer to this story of transformation. Like Dionysus himself, Orpheus suffered dismemberment, his head continuing to sing as it floated down the river to Lesbos. This image of fragmentation leading to expanded influence perfectly captures the Plutonic process. What appears as destruction on one level enables broader dissemination on another. What Orpheus ultimately teaches us about Pluto is that the journey into darkness, while necessary, need not be merely an experience of loss and deprivation. Through the power of art, through initiated wisdom, through love itself, the descent can become a transformation. The very powers that appear most threatening, death, dismemberment, loss, can become, when properly understood, sources of renewal and expanded consciousness. This understanding would prove influential far beyond ancient Greece. The image of Orpheus, the poet who dared to face death armed only with his art, who transformed personal loss into universal teaching, would resonate through Western culture. His vision of Pluto as both destroyer and renewer, as keeper of vital depths rather than mere guardian of the dead, would inform everything from Dante's Divine Comedy to Jung's psychology of the unconscious. And of course, it's worth mentioning that Platonism and Pythagoreanism are Orphic in nature. The Orphic mysteries remind us that our relationship with Pluto, with the depths, with transformation itself, need not be purely passive or fearful. Through conscious engagement, through art and ritual and love, we can, like Orpheus, transform our inevitable encounters with darkness into sources of wisdom and renewal. The price may be high. Orpheus lost Eurydice and eventually his life. But the gift is profound, the ability to sing even in death's face, to find light in the depths, to transform loss into lasting wisdom. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, Pluto evolves from the fearsome ruler of Homer to something more complex, a god capable of love, vulnerability, and change. The Roman poet gives us perhaps our most cinematically vivid portrayal of the underworld and its king, presenting multiple angles on both the realm and its ruler through several interconnected stories. Let us begin with Ovid's masterful description of the underworld itself. There is a shelving path, shaded with dismal yew, which leads through profound silence to the infernal abodes. Here languid Styx exhales vapors, and the new-made ghosts descend this way, and phantoms when they have enjoyed funeral rites. Horror and winter possess these dreary regions far and wide, and the ghosts newly arrived know not where the way is that leads to the Stygian city, or where is the dismal palace of the black Pluto. Yet this is not a simple place of punishment. Ovid reveals a sophisticated society. The wide city has 1,000 passages, and gates open on every side. And as the sea receives the rivers for the whole earth, so does that spot receive all the souls. Nor is it too little for any amount of people, nor does it perceive the crowd to increase. The shades wander about, bloodless, without body and bones. And some throng the place of judgment, some the abode of the infernal prince. Some pursue various callings, in imitation of their former life. Their own punishment confines others. This description reveals that death is a translation into another state of being. The underworld mirrors life above, with its own society, judgments, and activities. Even those bound for punishment exist within a larger context of continuing existence. The story takes its most dramatic turn when Venus decides to extend her power even into the underworld. Her conversation with Cupid reveals Ovid's innovation, making even Pluto vulnerable to love's arrow. Venus thus spoke. He opened his quiver, and by the direction of his mother, set apart one out of his 1,000 arrows, but one than which there is not any more sharp or less unerring, or which is more true to the bow. And he bent the flexible horn by pressing his knee against it, and struck Pluto in the breast with the barbed arrow. This moment fundamentally changes the nature of what follows. The abduction of Proserpina, while still violent, becomes colored by genuine passion. Ovid gives us perhaps the most vivid description of the event in classical literature. Not far from the walls of Henna, there is a lake of deep water, Pergus by name. Caister does not hear more songs of swans in his running streams than that. A wood skirts the lake, surrounding it on every side and with its foliage, as though with an awning, keeps out the rays of the sun. The boughs produce a coolness, the moist ground flowers of Tyrian hue. There the spring is perpetual. Into this idyllic scene crashes transformation itself, while Proserpina is amusing herself and is plucking either violets or white lilies. And while with childlike eagerness she is filling her baskets and her bosom, and is striving to outdo her companions of the same age in gathering, almost at the same instant she is beheld, beloved and seized by Pluto. In such great haste is love. The detailed geography of the abduction connects the underworld to our own through volcanic landscape. The ravisher drives on his chariot and encourages his horses, called each by his name, along whose necks and manes he shakes the reins, dyed with swarthy rust. He is borne through deep lakes and the pools of the Polici, smelling strong of sulphur and boiling fresh from out of the burst earth. When we reach the story's resolution, Ovid shows us how transformation works, even at the divine level. Jupiter's mediation between Pluto and Ceres establishes a cosmic pattern. But Jupiter, being the mediator between his brother and his disconsolate sister, divides the rolling year equally between them. For now, the goddess, a common divinity of two kingdoms, is so many months with her mother and just as many with her husband. The effects of this arrangement reveal themselves immediately in nature. Immediately the appearance of both her mind and her countenance is changed, for the brow of the goddess, which of late might appear sad even to Pluto himself, is full of gladness, as the sun, which has lately been covered with watery clouds, when he comes forth from the clouds, now dispersed. This mention that even Pluto noticed Proserpina's sadness suggests a capacity for empathy in the Lord of the Dead, a far cry from Homer's implacable ruler. It's worth noting how Ovid builds his characterization. WWE see Pluto as a lover, as a ruler, as the brother of Jupiter, as the son-in-law of Ceres. Ovid also shows how Pluto governs his realm. When Tisiphone, one of the Furies, is dispatched on a mission, we see the formal structures of underworld power. Nor is there any delay. The persecuting Tisiphone takes a torch reeking with gore, and puts on a cloak red with fluid blood, and is girt with twisted snakes, and then goes forth from her abode. Mourning attends her as she goes, and fright and terror and madness with quivering features. The poet reveals to us not just the underworld's king, but its entire administration, the Furies, the judges, the various functionaries that keep this mirror society running. The attention to bureaucratic detail makes the underworld feel more real, more substantial than previous portrayals. The transformative aspect of Pluto's realm appears even in its punishments. When describing the fate of certain shades, Ovid emphasizes not just suffering, but change. Some pursue various callings. In imitation of their former life, their own punishment confines others. This suggests that even punishment in the underworld serves a purpose. It transforms the soul through experience. Perhaps most remarkably, Ovid gives us a Pluto who himself is transformed by love. After being struck by Cupid's arrow, he becomes capable of feeling what mortals feel, of understanding the power of love and loss. This transformation doesn't make him less the king of the underworld. Rather, it makes him more complete, more capable of understanding the souls in his care. The influence of Ovid's portrayal cannot be overstated. His vivid, personalized vision of Pluto and his estate would inspire countless artists, from Dante to our own times. The idea that even the Lord of the Dead could be transformed by love, that the underworld itself could be a place of continuing life and activity rather than punishment, opened new ways of thinking about death, transformation, and the cyclical nature of existence. What emerges from Ovid's treatment is a truth about transformation. The change, even the most dramatic kind represented by death, is not about ending, but about translation from one state to another. His Pluto presides not over a realm of final endings, but over a necessary phase in the greater cycle of being, a cycle in which love is binding and guiding us. The poet's genius lies in how he combines these faces of Pluto, lover, ruler, force of nature, into a coherent character. His Pluto is neither the implacable Homeric death god nor the philosophical principle we found in Plato, but something more human, a being capable of passion and change while still keeping his essential connection to the mysteries of transformation. Through Ovid's way of seeing Pluto, we see how love operates as a force of metamorphosis, capable of changing even the unchangeable lord of the underworld. When we reach Dante's Divine Comedy, we find our subject split in two, a division that reveals how medieval Christianity transformed the classical underworld. The once unified Pluto divides into Ploutos, a demonic guardian of the fourth circle, and Dis, the fallen angel who rules the lower depths. And I can assure you that Dante was not confused when he created this division. This was a deliberate choice that transformed the ancient god of the underworld into aspects of Christian evil. We first encounter this transformation when Dante and Virgil reach the fourth circle of hell. We came unto the point where the descent is. There we found Ploutos, the great enemy. This great enemy is a far cry from Ovid's love-struck deity or Plato's philosophical ruler. Ploutos appears as a grotesque figure, uttering one of the Inferno's most enigmatic lines, Pape Satan, alepe. The gibberish nature of this exclamation suggests both the incomprehensibility of evil and the degradation of classical wisdom without Christian truth. Virgil's response is telling, Be silent, thou accursed wolf. Consume within thyself with thine own rage. Not causeless is this journey to the abyss. Thus is it willed on high, where Michael wrought vengeance upon the proud adultery. The reference to Michael's victory over the rebellious angels places Ploutos firmly in the Christian narrative of celestial warfare. He is no longer a legitimate ruler of a necessary realm, but a defeated enemy, a wolf, an image and symbol of greed and rapacity. More significant still is how Dante handles Dis. The name, taken from one of Pluto's classical appellations, now designates both a city and its ruler. The city of Dis marks a crucial boundary in hell, hence in the smallest circle, where the point is, of the universe, upon which Dis is seated, whoe'er betrays forever is consumed. The placement of Dis at the very bottom of the universe inverts the classical imagery of Pluto's underground kingdom. Rather than ruling a realm that contains both punishment and blessing, as in the Eleusinian view, or serving as a necessary counterpart to the upper world, as in Plato, Dis represents the ultimate point of spiritual degradation, the furthest possible distance from God. The transformation is complete. The ancient god who ruled both death and rebirth, who commanded both punishment and purification, has been split into a bestial guardian of material wealth, Ploutos, and the epitome of spiritual corruption, Dis. What's fascinating is how Dante achieves this through careful manipulation of classical imagery. Consider how Ploutos falls when Virgil rebukes him. Even as the sails inflated by the wind involved together fall when snaps the mast, so fell the cruel monster to the earth. This deflation suggests the emptiness of material wealth, but it also recalls how the classical Pluto could be overcome by divine authority, as when Zeus commanded him to return Persephone. The difference is that in the classical version, Pluto retained his dignity and legitimate authority even in submission. Dante's Ploutos, by contrast, collapses into monstrous impotence. The city of Dis similarly transforms classical imagery. Like the classical underworld, it is a city with walls and gates, but now these are garrisoned by fallen angels and furies. The furies, who serve Pluto's justice in classical myth, are here reduced to demons tormenting the damned. The legitimate authority of the underworld has become the illegitimate tyranny of hell. Yet even as Dante transforms these figures, he preserves certain aspects of the classical Pluto. Both Ploutos and Dis retain associations with wealth, but now it's strictly material wealth, divorced from the spiritual riches that the Orphic tradition associated with Pluto. They maintain power over souls, but now it's purely punitive, without the transformative aspect central to the Eleusinian mysteries. This tells us something crucial about how medieval Christianity viewed the classical underworld. Rather than simply rejecting it, Dante's poem splits it into its material and spiritual aspects, condemning both but in different ways. Ploutos represents the bestial nature of material greed, while Dis embodies the spiritual pride that in Christian theology led to the fall of Lucifer. What's lost in this transformation is the ancient understanding of death and the underworld as necessary parts of a larger cycle. Pluto's realm, which in classical thought contained both punishment and purification, blessing and curse, is reduced to a place of pure punishment. The Lord of necessary transformation becomes the enemy of all transformation, trapping souls in eternal torment. Yet paradoxically, by splitting Pluto into these aspects, Dante creates new kinds of transformation. Plutus's collapse before Virgil's rebuke shows how material power can be deflated by spiritual authority. The city of Dis, with its demons masquerading as classical deities, reveals how ancient wisdom can be both preserved and transformed through Christian allegory. For our understanding of Pluto's evolution, the Divine Comedy marks a crucial turning point. After Dante, it became increasingly difficult to view the classical lord of the underworld without Christian overtones. Even modern interpretations that return to classical sources must face the powerful imagery of Dante's infernal transformation. His split vision of Ploutos and Dis reminds us that transformation itself can be transformed, that even the Lord of Change is subject to change. What we've traced through these ancient texts and modern discoveries isn't just the evolution of an idea, it's a map of transformation. From Plato's philosophical ruler to Homer's dreaded king, from Orphic mystic to Eleusinian mystery, from Ovid's lover to Dante's demon, each face of Pluto reveals another facet of how humans navigate profound change. But the real revelations emerge when we step back and see the patterns that no one talks about. First, look at the remarkable synchronicity. Pluto was discovered astronomically in 1930, exactly when humanity was beginning to discover its own psychological depths through psychoanalysis. Just as we were learning to map the unconscious mind, we found its cosmic counterpart, a world that, like the unconscious, affects us whether we can see it or not. This was not a coincidence. Like Pluto's underworld entrance in ELEUSIS, it marked a point where hidden forces break through into consciousness. Consider how our relationship with Pluto mirrors our relationship with transformation. The astronomical community tried to demote it, to strip it of planetary status, just as Christianity tried to demote the god to demon status, just as we try to demote or deny the transformative forces in our own lives. Yet in each case, this rejection only increases Pluto's power. The dwarf planet has more moons than Mercury, Venus, Earth and Mars combined. The demon Ploutos commands one of Dante's largest circles. The repressed transformation returns with greater force. Here's what no one tells you about Pluto. It's not really about death. It's about thresholds, those points where one state of being transitions into another. The Greeks understood this. That's why their Pluto was both the ruler of death and the source of wealth. That's why the Eleusinian mysteries were about both agriculture and immortality. That's why Orpheus could enter the underworld through music. Because art is a threshold state, a transformation of experience into expression. Look at Pluto's physical features, a heart-shaped plane of frozen nitrogen that sublimates directly from solid to gas, skipping the liquid state entirely. This is what real transformation looks like, not gradual change, but quantum leaps between states of being. This is why the Eleusinian mysteries were required. This is why Orpheus had to descend. Some changes can't be approached gradually. You have to cross the threshold. The relationship between Pluto and Charon teaches us something crucial about transformation. It's always relational. They're so close in size that astronomers consider them a binary system, orbiting a point between them. This mirrors the Eleusinian initiate and hierophant, the Orphic singer and his lyre, the psychoanalyst and analysand. Real transformation requires both the force of change and the means of navigating it. Notice how each tradition we've examined offers a different technology of transformation. Plato gives us philosophical dialectic. Transformation occurs through reason. The Eleusinian mysteries offer ritual initiation, transformation through experience. Orpheus shows us artistic creation, transformation through expression. Ovid reveals the power of love, transformation through relationship. Dante demonstrates allegory, transformation through metaphor. Each of these is a different way of crossing the threshold, a different means of navigating quantum change. But they all recognize the same truth. Transformation requires both structure and surrender. You need the ritual framework and the mystical experience. You need the philosophical system and the direct encounter with mystery. You need both Pluto and Persephone. Here's the practical application. When you face moments of profound change in your life, whether chosen or forced upon you, remember these ancient technologies of transformation. Ask yourself, what's the structure that can hold this change? That's Pluto's realm. What's the experience that can catalyze it? That's the Eleusinian kykeon. What's the art that can express it? That's Orpheus's lyre. What's the love that can sustain it? That's Ovid's insight. What's the story that can frame it? That's Dante's allegory. But most importantly, remember that Pluto teaches us to stop fearing transformation. Every ancient source we've examined shows the same pattern. What begins in terror ends in revelation. The dreaded god becomes the philosophical guide. The abducted maiden becomes the queen of souls. The grieving singer becomes the mystic founder. The planetary demotion reveals a new class of celestial objects. This is why the Eleusinian mysteries lasted 2,000 years, because they worked. This is why Orphic teachings influenced both Plato and Pythagoras, because they're true. This is why Pluto still fascinates us, still influences us, still transforms us, because it represents something fundamental about reality, the necessity and nobility of profound change. In the end, Pluto's lessons are practical as well as profound. Don't fear the depths, they contain what you need most. Don't resist transformation, it will only intensify. Don't go alone, find your Charon, your guide. Don't skip the structure, find your ritual, your method. Don't avoid the threshold, cross it consciously. The ancients knew something we're rediscovering. Transformation isn't a punishment. It's not even really an ending. It's a threshold, a quantum leap, a necessary passage from one state of being to another. Whether we're talking about personal psychology, collective evolution, or cosmic reality, Pluto teaches us that the deepest transformations lead to the highest revelations. This is why we still need Pluto. Not just the astronomical body or the mythological figure, but the principle itself. In an age of unprecedented change, we need these ancient technologies of transformation more than ever. We need to remember how to cross thresholds consciously, how to navigate quantum changes skillfully, and how to transform not just our circumstances but our own personal being. Because in the end, that's what Pluto has always represented. Not just death, not just wealth, not just power, but the profound truth that real transformation is both inevitable and initiatory. If we learn to work with it rather than against it, to cross its thresholds with awareness rather than resistance, we might find, like those ancient initiates, that what we feared most contains what we needed most. This is Pluto's ultimate teaching. The depths are not our enemy. The threshold is not our end. Transformation is not our punishment. They are our path. To wisdom, to growth, to that strange and necessary rebirth that awaits us all in the heart-shaped plane at the edge of everything we thought we knew. This is Pluto,